So it's a little bit of repeat. It's always a pleasure to be here. And and Shabbat, Tetzaveh, you order or you command. From the Torah, we read from book of Shemot 27, 20 to 30. 10 half Torah came from Ezekiel 43, 10 to 27. And from Messianic writings, we read from book of Hebrews 13, 10 to 16. Before I go to, let's call it the brief of brief. This seems to be a parasha of precision, detail. Let's call it attention to detail, measurements, and other things. Very, very, very interesting. And for those with technical minds, clearly we'll find this parasha very, very exciting when we read it in the full portion in your homes. So, a brief parasha, it'll say a brief of brief. It starts with God's commanding the people of Israel to bring pure oil of pounding olives. When I first read this, the very first verse, pounded olives, what does it mean? Why pounded, not just a pure or crushed or pounded olives? And I actually went sort of looking the difference between pounded olives, because I did little bits of, while I was at school, I did little bits of work in olive oil and all the grades of olive oil. But there's a big difference between a just pure olive oil, for everyone knows, it's very known by virgin olive oil, and pounded olive oil. Pounded olive oil is the purest of purest you can get. It's literally, imagine you have an olive, you crush, leave it, drain the oil. There's not much pressure applied to it to extract all the oil. So that was the first technicality I sort of stumbled by. But as I say, this is a parasha of lots of sort of precision and detail, and easily we can get lost in details. So the pure olive oil was basically for the lights that will keep burning continually in the tent of meeting. And that will become a permanent regulation throughout all generations. Wow, how much pure olive oil they'll need. That's a question for another portion. We also read in detail how the priest's garments should be made with fine linen, gold and blue, purple and scarlet yarn, and it also continues with the task of the priesthood, what they need to do, how, and the consecration, and in more detail, the tents of the meetings. It's a parasha, as I can repeat myself, full of detail, and perhaps definitely require great attention to detail. When we read through this parasha, one of the things I've noticed is that it's a name that has been a permanent feature in every single parasha in the last few weeks, if not months, but not included on this parasha. Moshe is a name that has been present in every single portion of the Torah since he was born, but not mentioned by name at all on this parasha. While the focus was literally 100% on his brother Aaron and his role of Kohen Hagadol. It brought in some way the feeling that Moshe was sort of passing on the baton to the next generation. Or was there something else? Was it more to it? Now, when you read through, there's lots of assumptions and lots of talk around the subjects. And the one that perhaps I found more sort of in line and in line to the portion today is the one that perhaps take us back in a few parashas back in the book of Exodus. And When we read, when we talk about the encounter of Adonai and Moshe, when Adonai wanted Moshe to go to Egypt and lead the people out of Egypt, one of his answer perhaps was refusing, let's say maybe one time too many, that request for God to lead the Israelites out of Egypt. And as I mentioned, the most prominent example comes from Exodus 4:13-14, when Adonai asked Moshe to lead the Israelites from the Egypt, and his reply, "Please, Lord, send someone else, anyone you want but me." And moving for verses 14, which states, "At this point, Adonai's anger blazed up against Moshe, and he said, 'Don't you have a brother, Aaron, the Levi? I know that he is good speaker. In fact, here he is now, coming out to meeting you, and he'll be happy to see you.'" There is some plausible assumption at this point was the start of Moshe's downfall. Perhaps. So, lots of questions on this parasha, lots of questions. And when I read it, I'd imagine everyone had lots of questions reading through. It's questions out of question and more question than answer. Now, when we looked at the precision and the requirements for the garments, why was it that God has commanded to make a special garment for the priests? Was it for the glory or was it for beauty? And how does it fit, let's say, in Judaism? Maybe perhaps we can go far and say in modern Judaism. Because the Torah itself, and this portion is focused precisely and describes in great detail how these holy garments, which the priest and high priest wore while they served in a holy place, based on the requirement of the materials and how it should be made, it clearly was, let's say, a special, luxurious garment. And one could say that this seems to sort of contradict the fundamental values of Judaism. Focus on material things, garments, and the clothes were made to be seen, the garments. If you look at the gold and the blue, and it's, was meant to intend to catch the eyes, to impress. But we all know Judaism is not known as a religion of the eye, a religion of sin. In reality, it's known as a religion of ear, the focus on listening, hearing. That is what the focus of Judaism is. But so far, all we read, the key focus is in the garments of the priests, what he will look like when he serving in the office of the holy place. In fact, one of the key prayer in Judaism that is recited daily and every Shabbat service across all synagogue is based on one key word, Shema, meaning hear, listen. And going back to the Judaism history has mostly been all about listening rather looking. Feels like there'd be a contradiction here. And we can go back and say, when it comes to garments, for all we know about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they didn't wear any special garments. They didn't wear any special clothes. Moshe didn't wear any special clothes. They were simple shepherds. They dressed simply in every single event we know about. Which perhaps is in line what we know as Judaism be the religion of inwards, no appearances or ethics. Religion of ethics, not power, not the character, not what we look like or we dress. But Moving on. Again, what next question? There is an old say that goes by, clothes make the man. How accurate is this in contest with this parasha? Does really clothes make the man? Well, when we look into this with a sort of, let's say, a open mind, clothes certainly do impress us as human beings. Nothing else tells more about a person or makes a great first impression than how someone is dressed. And it's quite remarkable to a degree. A person's entire character can be summed up by someone who does not know that person simply by how they're dressed. Now, one thing we can sort of put into perspective, if right now one of you walk outside this building and you bump into someone on the street, they look at your keeper, the very first thing they will sum up you, he's Jewish, this, a link to this is that. And that is how, the mindset, the human being mindset works. And in the same talk, we'll say, if we bump into someone with a kippah all dressed in black, we know exactly how our brain will sort of, that person is Orthodox and ultra-Orthodox, and that is how we see, that's how our brain works. So how does it fit in with this parasha? And then we looked at, there's uniforms, for example. We look at schools, we look at army, we look at, wherever there's that need to minimize the difference between groups. What we as a society tend to do, we put them in uniforms, put the kids in uniforms, so they are all sort of similar. There's not much of difference in between. If you are police, you have, you are police because you wear a sort of uniform. Without uniform, you are just the person. Does it really mean you are what you wear? And in another sense, if you want to be different, we can also do by changing what we're wearing. And that is the perception, that is the mirror of the society, that's how things are seen. And this is one of the things that interests in this parasha, because the Torah certainly understands this as well. This is not a new concept. These are very, very old concepts of the, what you dress and what the perception that it generates. So, looking into this, in this parasha, there's more than 40 verses on a single topic, which is devoted to the holy clothing, the ritual of the high priest. Now, does it seem that the Torah is telling us the clothes do make the man? Or at least the role which the person is serving. Now, when we look at Aaron, he was very, I'll say, well respected amongst the Israelites. He was loved among the people. But there was that requirement. When he engaged in a work that is holy, he had to be suitably dressed in holy garments. The clothes that add dignity and splendor to the service he was doing. The service he was doing. To this, there's a clear, it's clearly defined that it shows that the holy service is greater than the person conducting the service. It continues from generation to generation. It's not the person, it's not the clothes, it's moving on. You put the holy garment today, but tomorrow will be someone else, and continues. Yeah. And it presents that stability and persistence of faith through time, because there's no an end. It's generation, after generation. And it also prevents the service of goats from becoming merely routine. And it's very clear in this parasha that the phrase Tetzaveh, for glory and for beauty, does not mean for glory and for the glory and the beauty of the priests, but for the glory of God and the beauty of his presence. I suppose one could say, if there have been only prophets and not priests, perhaps Israel should not survive, because it would have lacked the essential ability to sustain the mission over time. We have that sort of priesthood that is generational, will always renew itself. There's no end to it. And it adds that structure, that focus, and has that community, that faith, that perseverance among the Israelites at the time. And talk about the garments, and then the same thing, the same theme continue with the tent of meeting. How needs to be assembled, what needs to be where. And then it's that visual aspect. It's built to be seen. It's not just a tent, put few four pieces of wood and put cloth on top and we go. No, it's very specific and very detailed in measurements and position and color and the material that needs to be used for it. Again, it's kind of that visual end result. It needs to look good. It needs to catch the eyes. Whoever is walking 10 miles or 5 miles, see that and can say, wow, that's something splendid here. But again, it's kind of that in first sight, there's that sort of clash, but it's that Judaism. It's about, we want to hear, we want to listen, not to see things. But why the theme of make things great and to catch the eyes? Now, when we look at this, going back to what happened while the Israelites were in the desert, the incidents with golden calf, perhaps give us some hints why we arrive at the points that we need, the priests and the tent of meeting looking, capturing that, the eyes and the vision of the Israelites. So, when we look at that conversation of, Moshe and Adonai, it seemed that the people were terrified with God. At that point, the Israelites didn't connect to God, didn't know God directly other than via Moshe. And everything they saw up to that point was great, overwhelming power of Adonai. We've seen the destruction of the greatest empire in the world known at that time to its knees, Egypt. We've seen his power turning sea into dry land. That's what they've saw. He's powerful. They've saw food come from heaven and water from rock. That's all they knew. And they were scared. And then we can read on Exodus 20:19, which when they heard the voice of Adonai in Mount Sinai, the Israelites came to Moshe and they begged him not, for him to be in between, them and God. What he said, you speak with us and we will listen, but don't let God speak with us or we will die. There's a sense of being scared because there was no that direct interaction between the two. There's always someone in between. And perhaps one way to look into the whole incident, was it the reason the Israelites made the calf was perhaps not because they wanted to worship idols, but because they wanted a symbol of God. They need a sense of God, not in the sky, on the top of mountain, or in the mid, but they wanted it in the midst of the camp where they were dwelling. What the incidents of the calf scene showed is that perhaps the people could not relate to God, who gave them no permanent, visible sign of his presence, who could only be communicated by greatest prophets and perhaps the likes of Moshe. And it seemed it was hard to believe of gods of everywhere in general, but nowhere in particular. It seems to be hard to sustain a relationship with God who is only evident in miracles and unique events, but not in everyday life of the Israelites. It was hard to relate to God when he only manifests himself as overwhelming power. So the Meshkan, the tent of meeting, became the visible sign of God's continual presence in the midst of the people. Those who minister did so not because of their personal greatness. The holy place acknowledge the fact that the human spirituality is about emotions, not just intellects. The heart, not just the mind. God does not live in the building, but rather in the hearts of the builders. And as we can read on book of Exodus 8, let them make for me a sanctuary. I will dwell amongst them. The purpose of the emphasis on the visual elements of the Meshkan and the garments of those who served in the office was to create that atmosphere and reverence, because they pointed to a beauty and splendor beyond the realm of human understanding. We humans, we are parts spiritual, and living in a physical world, it tends to be struggle to relate and connect to spiritual gods with no physical form. The physical aspect of the tent of meeting, including the garments, help people to connect through visual and physical aspects, which is that kind of us being human being. And its purpose was to bring the experience of God amongst the Israelites. And that regular routines, the offerings, and the being here in the synagogue on Shabbat, things that keep on going, rather just doing things ad hoc, structure. And all these things, all these routines, is not performed or done by angel or special people. These are done by ordinary people. We have rabbis, we have the priests back in the days. They're just normal people. But it's not the person, it's the service. Yeah. We have come a long way. We have chosen life. We have chosen Yeshua, our Lord, who sees beyond garments. He sees beyond great buildings. But he is the one whom we faithfully believe. He is always there when we are up, when we are down, when we are strong, when we're weak, when we think there is nothing else but an end, when we are hopeless, when we believe there is nothing else left to fight for. He is there. Shabbat Shalom.